So everyone, yeah, thanks for inviting me to this. So just really quick introduction of myself. So my name is Abou-Magd. I'm the director of product at Akamai. So just a little bit of details about me. So I live in Ottawa, Canada. Akamai's got a ton of offices all around the world. One of them is a cool dev center that is in Ottawa. I am a very avid Toronto Raptors fan, and 2019 was probably the best year of my life when we finally won the championship after 25 years, which was amazing. Um, I am not a great golfer, but I have made it a priority to try to get a lot better, and I'm pretty excited for some of these to be able to get out there and enjoy some of the weather eventually, and start golfing and improve my game. So, uh, what we want to do is where's my mouse? There we go. So we're here to talk about serverless computing at the edge. And what I thought would be the best way to do this is through an example. And this example is basically going to be a frozen yogurt shop. So this is a fictitious frozen yogurt shop, which I've created. It is really awesome. We've got a lot of really amazing flavors. We have locations all around the world. And obviously we've got a really great e-commerce site that you guys can see here on the screen. And one new thing that we want to do after having this frozen yogurt shop business up for a few years is really want to revamp the site. And a reason for that is we want to deliver a more personalized experience for our users, give our users a personalized experience based off the location that they're in. Now, in order to do that, one of the things that I've done is I'm going to create a new beta version of the site. And that beta version is going to change the hero image depending on where the user is located. And one of the added layers of challenges that we want to do is making sure that we send out all of our customers or potential customers to this new beta site without impacting SEO, because our site has been up for a long time. We've got some really great SEO rankings, and we don't really want to impact that. So we're going to kind of go through, talk about all the different options that we have to be able to do that, and eventually get to how Akamai's EdgeWorkers can enable us to do that in a really cool and seamless way. So I've really got kind of a couple options to be able to, where I can utilize to figure out like where I can put my personalization logic, or some of this logic that's going to do the stuff that I just mentioned. And let's pretend that little JavaScript icon up there is my logic. So there's a couple options for where I can implement this logic. So the first is I put this logic on the server side. Well, by doing that, I can make sure that all of my users, who are coming in on different devices, have really great experiences and consistent experiences, but there's some downsides to it as well. Some of the main downsides are added latency. So because all my users are going to have to go back to origin, depending on where the user is from the origin, there's going to be a lot of latency added to them. It's going to introduce a bunch of unnecessary network hops. And it's also going to reduce my offload as well. Because I'm sending all of that traffic back to the origin, that basically means that I'm going to have to scale up my origin infrastructure, especially during peak demand, like during the summer. I'm going to have to scale it up even more. And that's not really something that I want to do. So let's go back to our personalization logic. And the other option that I have is I can put all of this logic out onto the client. Now, if it's out on the client, now latency kind of becomes a little bit less of an issue, but there's issues in doing it over here as well. So some of these issues are an inconsistent user experience. There's a wide proliferation of devices out there. All of them have different kinds of power levels, different kind of battery memory levels as well. So not all of my users are going to get a really great experience. Over downloading of bytes as well. I want to personalize the image that I end up sending to my users, and I really don't want everybody to be downloading all the possible images and only displaying one of those. It's going to impact performance, going to eat away at network costs, at bandwidth that my users have. By kind of putting my logic on the client as well, I'm more vulnerable to malicious actors who want to go in, change the experience, or just do something else. Now, one of the interesting things is we've actually solved a similar problem to this in the past. So Akamai's kind of solved this problem of delivering consistent low latency experiences about 20 years ago with the introduction of the CDN. So we've got a network right now which is globally distributed. So we've got about 250,000 globally distributed edge servers. Each one of these edge servers are within one network hop of over 90% of the world's internet users. And what that results in is effectively maximum offload, really great performance, and improved security for end users around the world. So a thought kind of came to mind, which is, what if we kind of reuse this exact same CDN footprint to run code? So what if we actually enabled or turned every single one of our edge servers to have the ability to effectively turn every single one of our edge machines into a compute node, right? Where they effectively can now safely deploy JavaScript onto every single one of these servers using Chrome 8 v-isolates. Effectively, by doing that, one of the things that we've done is transformed this large CDN footprint into the world's largest low latency serverless compute network. And this is effectively what EdgeWorkers is. So it's a large globally distributed serverless compute network that sits on top of the Akamai CDN. And it's really a new way to drive powerful web experiences by enabling developers to run JavaScript at the edge on top of web traffic. So one thing I want to do is kind of quickly shift back to our previous example, which was, I've got this logic that's going to do, wants to maintain SEO, and it also wants to deliver that personalized experience. We walked through kind of the two examples or the two options that I traditionally had. But one of the cool things of introducing EdgeWorkers, or effectively having serverless compute at the edge, is we've now introduced a third option. And that third option is deploying that logic out onto the CDN, onto the edge machines. And what that effectively allows us to do is make sure that our logic now executes at the edge server that's absolutely nearest to the end user. So we kind of solve our latency or performance problem. It's able to auto scale and achieve maximum offload. Auto scaling from the standpoint of, one of those benefits that you get from serverless platforms. Deploy your code once and it automatically runs on all the machines in the network. In terms of maximum offload, it's running on the CDN itself. And it also eliminates that client-side burden that we talked about. So all of the over-downloading problem and ensuring that we're going to have a consistent experience for all of our end users, regardless of where they come in from. So I kind of want to pause really quickly and just dive in a little bit deeper into how EdgeWorkers actually works. And it works on an event model. So it works on an event model. So effectively, EdgeWorkers allows you to execute code at 4 events. So these events are on client request. So effectively, as the request comes in, before you actually before the CDN checks cache, you can execute some JavaScript, some logic written in JavaScript. The second event is on origin request. So that's effectively if the response isn't served from cache, and before we actually go off to the origin, we can execute some logic. On origin response, so when the origin responds with content before actually going back out, we can execute some logic. And then the fourth event that you have access to is on client response. So before the response is sent out to the client, you can execute logic as well. Now, this really makes it pretty easy to be able to customize a lot of customize your logic and just make sure that you're delivering the right experience to your users by leveraging each one of these points or any combination of these events, really. One other thing as well is because this is built on top of the CDN, or it's kind of like that intersection of serverless and the CDN network. EdgeWorkers also gives you access to the same information that the CDN has. So this type of information includes stuff like the geolocation, device characteristics. So what kind of device is the user on? How big is that device? What's the pixel density ratio? Stuff like that. And just any other general information about the request as well. And you can use all that information to be able to build the logic that you want to really deliver the right experience to your user. So one thing we're going to do is we're actually going to use some of this information I just mentioned, going back to our frozen yogurt example. And I'm really quickly just going to switch my screen here and share something else. There we go. So just really quickly going back to our example, and if you remember our example, it was we wanted to deliver, we created this cool new beta site, and we wanted to deliver a personalized experience to our users depending on which location that they come in from. So depending on which location the user is in from, we're going to change that hero image to one that's more personalized for their location. And we also didn't want to impact our SEO rankings. So what I've got on the screen is effectively the JavaScript, the EdgeWorker JavaScript that's going to be able to do that for us. Now, one thing about EdgeWorkers is basically you write all of your logic inside of the main.js file. You have access to the 4 events. You can include any other dependencies that you want. You bundle that thing, you bundle up your code, and then you push it out onto the Akamai network. And then within minutes, your code is running on all of those servers that we had mentioned earlier. So if we take a look at our code here, just really quickly kind of walking through how we were able to achieve this use case. Up here, you'll notice that we're defining the country top level domain mapping. In here, we've got a map that contains our personalized hero image based on the location. So for example, if I'm coming in from Canada, I'm going to change the hero image to be of strawberry frozen yogurt. If I'm coming in from Great Britain, it'll be chocolate frozen yogurt. If I'm coming in from the US, it'll be vanilla frozen yogurt. Now, in this case, I'm only going to be triggering my codes to be running on a single event. That's really all I need for my use case. And that single event is going to be on client request. And you'll notice here that I have access to this request object. This request object effectively has all of the information that's associated with the request that I can start to do things to. So an example of something I have access to is the host. So in this case, I'm breaking out my subdomain and my domain from that request. I'm figuring out here where my top level domain is based on the request country of origin. So I mentioned earlier that one of the benefits of EdgeWorkers is you do have access to the geolocation of the end user, so you can start to do some cool things with them. In this case, we're pulling out where the user is actually located and then going to be changing the top level domain based off the user's location. Here, I'm also going to be using that same user location to be able to figure out which hero image I want to send down to the user. And I've got a couple if statements here to make sure that if any of that is undefined or I run into a problem, I've got some defaults. Here I'm building up my new domain and then going to be, which effectively is going to redirect my user out to my new beta site, so I can maintain my SEO rankings and I don't do any negative impact to that. I'm going to be able to rebuild this entire thing and redirect my user entirely using EdgeWorkers. And then finally, at the end, we're going to send back a response to the client that's got information on the new location and then also on the hero image that's going to be displayed to the end user. So pretty simple to write, not a lot of code to write, and is able to achieve that really great use case that we talked about, all entirely on the edge. So just quickly go back here to my PowerPoint, and I want to show you guys some of the benefits. So we've kind of written our EdgeWorker. It's got the logic to be able to solve our use case, which is really awesome. Let's take a look at some of the benefits, because there obviously are a bunch of serverless platforms out there that can be utilized. Now, one of the great things is that there's really kind of two main benefits in being able to run this logic at origin versus doing it at the edge. So in this example, let's pretend that my origin is running in US East. And here's a map that we've kind of very quickly put together that shows you what the end user latency or the end user performance is going to be for users around the world. Now, it's obvious to see here that the further my user is from the origin, the bigger the performance is going to be because of all the added latency that's involved. Now, if we flip to kind of see what the scenario looks like when you're running that same code at EdgeWorkers on Akamai's EdgeWorker platform, instead of actually running it at origin, you kind of see two big benefits that come up out of the gate. The first is that the performance is a lot better. And the reason for that is, remember earlier we talked about that every single one of those machines that's running in this really globally distributed network that's one hop away from about 90% of the users globally, every single one of those is executing our function. And they're executing our function, and it's the machine that's closest to the end user that's executing our function. That's why we're able to get a lot of great performance. So for example, my user who's coming in from Australia, who wants to go and check out my yogurt shop at my frozen yogurt shop in Australia, that function is going to execute it in a server in Australia. And the same thing kind of happens for a user who's coming in from Brazil, for instance. Instead of going all the way back to my origin in US East to have that function execute and then get the page come back to them, it's instead going to be happening in Brazil, which is right where they are. The second big benefit, so that was one, but the second big benefit is really consistency as well. So again, because the platform is really globally distributed, you start to see a lot of consistency in terms of the latency that the end users get to see, which is a really cool thing to see, especially as we start to scale up our frozen yogurt shop and really try to go global. So I just really quickly kind of went through an example there of personalization and being able to use redirects to be to maintain SEO rankings and not have negative impacts on SEO. That's really only one of the cool examples or of the cool use cases that can be built using serverless computing at the edge. There's a ton more out there. I've got a really short list that's out here as well that I've listed here on the screen. Anything from filtering bot traffic at the edge so you don't have to deal with it going back to origin, cookie and header manipulation, authentication, so doing things like JWT authentication at the edge as opposed to having to do it at origin or at your API gateway, A/B testing as well, dynamic content assembly, API orchestration, all sorts of use cases that you can leverage rather than kind of doing them at origin, which make a lot of sense to push out at the edge to get those benefits that we talked about performance, scalability, and just a consistent user experience. So one thing that we're really, really focused on is trying to make it as easy as possible to figure out like what those use cases are. So we've got a collection of the use cases I have on the screen here and more at our GitHub repo. So just encourage everyone to scan the QR code. It'll take you straight to our GitHub repo. We've got a bunch of these examples to kind of either get you inspired or to get to help you get started with building out your own use cases. And then another thing as well that we've been really working on pretty heavily is providing like a lot of the supporting tools. So one of the big key ones is TypeScript support. So full TypeScript support as well, just to make it easier as you start to develop your JavaScript, your EdgeWorker functions. So if you check out the QR code here, it'll take you straight to our npm page where you can download the TypeScript npm. With that, kind of going to close on, if you do want to learn more about EdgeWorkers and just serverless computing at the edge, head over to developer.akamai.com. It's got a ton of great information about how to sign up for utilizing it. Some other examples on kind of dives deeper into redirect, into how do you use EdgeWorkers for the SEO use case, and a bunch of other use cases as well. And with that, thanks everybody.